The content that we are talking about today does have mature content, and so just be aware of that before you blast it on while you're working or while you're driving. People might look at you a little funny. But we are thankful for you, and know that there is, again, mature content in this sermon. But we are excited that you're part of our church. We encourage you to engage with us on the site or on any of our social media, and we're excited what God's doing in your life. Anyone nervous now? Wow. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Ray. Today we're continuing our series into the Taboo, and today we're talking about sex. There we go. And that's actually a very proper response. But before we get into the topic and everything, just a couple things. If you want to sign up for Ladies Retreat or anything that we talked about, go on the Church Center app. Or you can go to the information booth. And then also our park picnic day is that we changed it to Heritage Park in Cerritos. It's a little closer, and they have a moat. I don't know about you, but as a kid, my dream house involved a wraparound porch and a moat. Am I the only one? Okay, great. You can't come over anyway. It's my moat. So we're going to just write it off of here, Bloomfield. So we put inside your bulletin a little directional card. Make sure to let us know that you're coming, and if you want to bring food, because a potluck is not very delicious if no one brings food. And then it's going to turn into a church family picnic fast. And so usually you want to prepare for those instead of walking into that. So I just wanted to throw that out there for you. We sent out an email this week, and I just want to reiterate, this is kind of a parental advisory. If you do not want your student or your child in here who's under 18 or whatever your number is, feel free to allow them to go to Kids Life. Shane is right there. He could escort them over, and then they're going to go serve, which is still a good thing. But if you're okay with them being in here, that is up to your discretion. My whole thing is it's not the government's job. It's not necessarily the church corporate job to educate your kids on sex. It's your job. So it's by your permission that they're here. We're good? Okay. I'll have to ask my parents' second service if I can stay. Which brings me to the point, if anyone has any reason to be awkward in this conversation, it will be me. Because at our church in second service will be my mother and father, who I am convinced they had all 4 children by immaculate conception, and my in-laws. So just know in this conversation, I have no, I had to do a lot of preparing this message, like finding the line. Because there's a line of being informative and educational, and then there's a line of being crass and being, this is really funny, so we're going to do this. Because sex is something that we should be able to laugh about and have conversations about. But I realize, I'm the pastor of a church, not the junior high pastor, or not at a marriage retreat, so I had to bring some of it back a little bit. And my wife so graciously let me know that I need to stay disciplined in the gray areas of my life, not have liberties. So, first week we started, we talked about just kind of the before the chaos. We laid the foundation of what life looked like before fall came into the world. This intimacy between man, woman, and God was happening. And there was, fruits that you could eat, couldn't eat. We had the knowledge of good without the knowledge of evil. And then mankind decided, hey, I want to know both of what's going on, and things flew into chaos. Then we talked about the role of the gospel in culture, how the very gospel instills that God is our authority. And so when we talk about these things like doubt, when we talk about things like sex, and next week sexuality, we talk about things like abortion and immigration, these things that we'll be discussing in the next few weeks, we have to understand and decide who is your authority. Is it going to be culture or is it going to be God's word? And then even understanding God's word, are you willing to dive a little deeper and gain understanding? Because this is a thousands-year-old book written to an Eastern audience that had no idea what an airplane was. And now we have to begin to understand what these things are. Are you willing to go from belief to understanding? Are you willing to wrestle in the gray areas of doubt and figure out, God, you said 6 days, but science is saying millions of years. How do I wrestle with it? How do I justify two of those things? And so these topics, you can just go through your life and go, I'm just going to believe in the Lord and he's going to be faithful. That's great. Hallelujah. We'll see you in heaven. But our goal isn't just to survive in this world until Jesus comes back or we die. Our goal is to be the light and the salt to the world, that people may know the truth, because there are people all around us who are just enslaved to their chaos. They're enslaved to the destruction that sin brought into the world, both behaviorally and naturally. And we talked about doubt and how doubt can be healthy and spur to greater faith. And man, if you are in a season of doubt, don't leave the community of the church, but press in. We need the people who are willing to ask the difficult questions. We need the people who are the inquisitive, who aren't automatically going to go say, okay, yes. Who are going to go, wait a minute. That's how we become better. We need those people in our church. And today, as we already mentioned, we're talking about sex. Fortunately, the church has come a long way where sex used to be a dirty word. You couldn't even say it in church. You couldn't mention it. It was like, you just keep that in the bedroom and don't mention it. Regardless of if it's a functional or dysfunctional relationship, don't talk about it. And so much of our dysfunctions within church world, we're taught just pray and thank Jesus and be a good Christian boy or girl and everything will be fine. And I struggle with that because I have a grandmother who was a part of the Foursquare church at the beginning of with Amy Simple McPherson, went and planted a church in Northern California with her husband, and she sat for years being mentally, physically, and sexually abused. But how dare a Christian come out and say, I'm hurting? And it wasn't for the bravery of my grandpa who went and stole her because she had polio and her husband refused to take her to the hospital because he was afraid that she would see the bruises. The doctors would see the bruises. The stigma and the shame that is put around topics that happen in the home have got to go. We've got to be willing to talk about these things. Now, I understand that we can do a full sermon series on sex, and maybe one day we will. But sometimes I like to test the water and kind of see. First of all, thank you for coming to service today. I was a little nervous putting the schedule out because I'm like, people are going to pick and choose. But you're here, you're brave, or you just didn't know. So either way, I'm glad you're here. If you want to go serving Kids Life, you are welcome to do so, no matter how old you may be. But kind of to lay the foundation again, 1 Thessalonians 5:23, to kind of understand who we are as human beings. Because when we begin to understand who we are as human beings, we begin to understand the importance of sex and the ramifications of walking outside of that sexual covenant that God has set up. And it says this, it says, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely. It's, just real quick, peace is not a defensive weapon. Peace is not just something that you hold up and go, God, the peace of God just protect me. No, the peace of God is actually a weapon. It's an offensive weapon. The peace of God is the weapon that God uses for you to go against the things that the enemy has for you, to go against the things that you are wrestling yourself. The peace of God comes to protect and to be aggressive with. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful, who will also do it. We have a God who has designed us beautifully. You are more than your physical body. Now, is your physical body bad? Absolutely not. Now, but you're also a soul. You're also a spirit. You're emotional. You're spiritual, and you're physical beings. And you are created to have a healthy, fulfilling sex life. Come on, can I get an amen? Let's try that again. You are supposed to, and called and designed to have a healthy sex life. Amen. Some of you are nervous. Some of you going, that's not possible. Some of you going, you don't know my spouse. Some of you going, I may never ever have a spouse. So when I say you are designed to have a healthy sex life, your thinking is, yeah, right. If we're honest. Because when the enemy came and sin entered into the world, our emotions got destroyed. And so now we don't know how to process the information we're getting. That's why someone can come up to you and say, hey, you look very nice today. And you're going, don't I look nice every day? What do you mean by that? You get offended instead of receiving because your emotions have been confused. We're created in God's image and his likeness. And the ability to engage in all three in a sexual relationship where both with your emotions, your intellect, and your physicality is able to be involved, that's intimacy. I have a feeling there's a lot of people in here, you've had sex, but you've never been intimate. And so let's define sex a little bit. It's more than a physical act. And it's interesting because sex outside of marriage, outside the marriage covenant, isn't described as sex. It's called as sexual immorality or fornication. It's not even considered sex, biblically. Because sex is something so much more inside this covenant. This is when sexual immorality, fornication, those things, this is when sex is used outside of its design for merely pleasure or for control. If you think sex is just about pleasure, you missed it. Check out this definition. You can write this down. It should be up here. Sex is designed and purpose for the multiplication of the human race. Okay, we know that one. Go be fruitful and be multiplied. It's to knit a husband and wife's souls together in deep physical, emotional, spiritual intimacy, and to be pleasurable. That's one of the things I love about God. He says, hey, take a day off and have fun doing what I told you to do. I don't know about you, that's grace of God, and I am willing to take that any day. And so, because think about it, God could have designed it not to be. God could have designed it to just be like, hey, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, this is what you got to do. Some of you are like, oh, that would be wonderful. But it's not just supposed to be a chore or a deed. It's supposed to be something that we enjoy with one another. And so we're going to talk about what it means to pursue a healthy sexual lifestyle. I'm going to talk to both married and singles. But just because we're in the married section, I don't want you singles shut off your brain and go, okay, I'll wait for my turn. No, and same with singles. When we're talking about singles, married, you need to pay attention to this. And so there is an interesting dynamic, and I understand even within our church, we have married, we have single, we have people who are just married, we have people who've been married for 40, 50 years, and so a sex life looks very different than 20-year-olds. And so I understand that context. In no way am I saying that I'm going to be exhaustive on this list, because this is supposed to start a conversation. Again, we have the Resource Center, which I'm going to be utilizing 2 books that we're going to be talking through. But just be aware of that. So I'm going to give you the points ahead of time, and we're going to really go into them at the end. But I want you to embrace healthy sexual intimacy and make Jesus the center of your intimacy. So those are the 2 points you can just write down right off the bat, and we'll come back to them. But we're going to talk about married sex. This is huge because often what happens, sex either can become familiar or it can become forgotten, or it can become a tool to manipulate and use others. And that's where that dominance comes in, where we use it to control somebody else. And God never designed sex to be a weapon. It's an invitation to intimacy. And whenever you use something that God meant for good for evil, you're going to experience the evil side of it. You're going to experience breakdown of relationship. You're going to experience breakdown of emotional connection and physical connection. You're going to see those things happen. But go ahead and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 through 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 through 9. I'm telling you, this may be your favorite Sunday you have ever been to at the well. This is going to be the thing. If you came here and your husband's not here, your wife's not here, you're going to want to say, hey, watch the YouTube video. And you're like, can we please apply the message? It'll hit you. It'll get you. Now, Paul's writing to the Corinthian church, and apparently he got some Q&A questions, which, by the way, I don't know if we have the Q&A slide up there, but we're going to be doing like a panel discussion at the end of the series. So if you have any questions on anything we've talked about, you can shoot a text to the church number, 562-860-2407. There may be a slide, may not be. If not, we'll send it out. And you can ask any of those questions anonymously, and we will kind of do our best to address those questions when we have the panel conversation. It says, now regarding the questions that you asked in your letter, this is Paul talking to the Corinthians. Yes, it is good to abstain from sexual relations. So have you ever heard an answer and you've always wondered what the question was? And or you ever seen like a warning sign? You go, why did they have to put that there? Like the one by, if you have a garage and it shows someone like crushed underneath the garage, because you know what happened, right? They're trying to be Indiana Jones. When you're trying to run out of the Lost Ark and you slide and you try to grab your hat, the only one's ever done that. That's what a garage door is for. Anyway, you see that, or it says, like you go into a bathroom, especially men's restrooms, it says stand within 3 feet of the urinal. Because someone's trying to stand like 10 feet away from the urinal, be a champion. And so there's these signs anyway. Yes, it's good to abstain from sexual relations, but because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife. Each woman should have her own husband. The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs. Husbands, highlight, underline that, make that a life verse. Okay, there's John 3:16 and 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 2. Each woman should have her own husband. The husband should fulfill his wife's needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. Ladies, highlight, underline, create it to be your life verse. Maybe not tattoo that one, but still important. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time so you can give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterwards, you should come together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of control. I think it's important to read this verse and to understand what it's not saying. Do not deprive each other from sexual relations unless you are both in an argument and you're mad at the other person. Don't deprive each other of sexual relations because you're exhausted and tired and that's the last thing on your mind. Don't deprive each other of sexual relationships because you just don't feel like it or because you're trying to control the other person. It says, no, the only way that abstaining from sexual relationships is healthy is when it's decided in agreement to pursue Jesus more. And I can probably say, for the most part, that has never been the reason for you why you and your spouse have gone through a season of kind of desert sexual relationships. It's usually because there's hurt and there's pain and there's frustration. Now, what I'm not saying is, hey, if you're upset at each other, just do it anyway. That's not accurate because it says you need to fulfill her needs. You need to fulfill his needs. But what it's saying is that your solution cannot be, we're just not going to do it anymore. Because what happens, the enemy slips in ever so slightly and begins whispering in the ears. And it's not just for men, it's for women too. When needs aren't being met, the enemy comes in and promises that he'll meet those needs. So, what are those needs? Did you know that husbands and wives are different? Do you know that men and women are different? Did you figure that out? Did you ever wonder, like, God, why did you make us so different? And so it really is the reality so we can complement each other. Because what our actual dysfunctions are actually our strengths for one another. When we begin to allow Jesus to be the center of that, we actually begin to have unity with each other. But we understand that intimacy is both physical bodies and emotions entangled. And I mentioned before that many of you have experienced sex but have never experienced intimacy. So this is from a book called The 5 Sex Needs of Men and Women by Dr. Gary and Barbara Roseberg, and we'll have this book available next week. But I kind of got this list. These are the top 5 sexual needs for men. Are we ready for church? Are we okay? Need to take a stretch? A little breather? We're good? All right. Now, understand each person is different. This is out of a survey over, I think it's like 500 people, no, like 800 people, and top percentages and different things. So what I want you to do is I want you to write this down, and I want you to mark which one's you. Yeah, I'm asking you to be vulnerable in church. I want you to mark which one is you, and if you are married, I want you to go and talk about this with your spouse. So you have homework, and hopefully the extra credit is fantastic. So, number 1, top 5 sexual needs for men. Number 1 is mutual satisfaction. Mutual satisfaction. This is important to understand because a lot of times the idea is, men just want to get something. It's actually the very top thing is they want to make sure not only are they receiving, their needs are being met, but they want to know that they are satisfying the needs of their partner, of their spouse. That actually means they need to not only release tension, but they have to be desired and they want to pleasure their wives. They want to do a good job. That's so important to men to know that the work that they're doing is actually accomplishing something. We're not that complicated. Number 2 is they want a connection. Men desire emotional and spiritual connection, and physical connection is key to a man, specifically physical connection. He wants to feel needed, wanted, inside and outside of sex. Men need physical sex as much as women need emotional connection through talking. That's huge to understand that. Learn what is important to him and value those things. Instead of, why are you watching that stupid game? Hey, can I sit and watch this game with you? Instantly like, oh, well, yeah, sure can. And isn't that what you do when you're dating? You don't walk in and go, this is stupid, you're stupid, and walk out. When you begin to appreciate the things they appreciate, maybe they've got that old car that they're working on, and instead of criticizing it, what if you begin going, oh, is there anything I can help? Tell me about it. And they say no, go, okay. Oh my gosh, hey, how you doing? I know, we're crazy. Number 3, responsiveness. This is one of those like, really? I didn't know this one. When a wife says yes to sex, that's a good thing. When the wife, there's a positive response when a wife says that there's no, because when a man hears the word no, it's an emotional rejection. It's not a physical rejection. It's an emotional rejection. And the questions start coming to mind. Why, not just that no was said, is why? Am I not attractive anymore? Is she not interested in me? Is there something else going on? All these questions begin filling their head, and it's amazing how quickly a man can turn into a little boy who's scared. Now, that is not to say that women, you have no right to say no. You have every right to say no. It is not about being enslaved to somebody else, but it's about serving one another. So guys, you have to understand that she's going to say no, and you have to respect that. But when your no becomes your habit, that's when there's an issue. And that's where there is an unhealth. This isn't about trying to women feel like you're being forced upon or manipulated, but to create a culture where no is the exception, not the rule. The 4th need for men is initiation. Men, including myself, I am a man. When there is initiation of when my wife pursues me, it's like, who is this girl? It's like, it's just that ability to you walk in the living room and you want your guy to turn off the game, just grab their hand and walk into the bedroom. There is very little argument there. There might be suspicion. Like, I always knew that you were going to be the one to kill me, but all right, guess here it comes. But when there's initiation of, hey, I planned a date night. Hey, I planned a weekend away. Hey, I just went shopping at Victoria's Secret. Hey, all these different things, for a man to be feeling that desired is guarantee they're going to walk into work, they're going to walk in wherever they're going the next day or after, they're going to walk in with their head held high going, yeah, that's right. There's a new confidence that isn't just because their guys are just horny. It's because, guys, there's a thing that does into their bodies the way God designed them, that now their physical, their emotional, spiritual connection is all in place. We're in alignment. And the fifth is affirmation. I cannot tell you, ladies, how important this is, that men don't need to hear about how terrible or what they're bad at because they've already been replaying it over and over in their head. To be able to be encouraged, to be lifted up, to be built up, to be spoken highly of, both in public and in private, I can't tell you enough. There will be never an issue about him taking out the trash because you speak so highly of him. And there are times when you go, he doesn't really deserve to be speak highly of. That's not your. It's important to be aware of those things. But when we call people up, when we say that you are great, you are fantastic, guess what people want to do? They want to become great and fantastic. They want to live up to their reputation. And so it is little change. Now, if there's abuse happening in the home, you need to get help. This is not a just grin through it and be happy and joyful and just, oh yeah, he's great. Meanwhile, he's making your life hell. You need to get help. You need to speak out. But for the majority, the amazing ability that you can affirm and celebrate your husband will go a long, long way. It's funny, men don't respond well to being told what to do, but we respond really well to coaching. Because it's different. Being told what to do is take out the trash. Do this. Do that. But coaching is, hey, you're doing an awesome job at this, but if you want to get better at it, try this and this. Go, try. Perfect. Great. You did awesome. Great job. All right, let's do it again. See the difference? Guys are like, all right, let's go. I'm just saying, ladies, don't dictate your husbands. Coach them. We need coaching. Believe me. But you're going to get better response if you begin coaching them instead of telling them what to do. All right, ladies. Christy. I am currently being graded. Now, understand this. This isn't my opinion. I had to go read it in a book by doctors who have studied this for decades. So this isn't my opinion. I read this as a student. Number one, affirmation. The greatest sexual need for women, according to these studies, was affirmation. When we as men need to verbally and tangibly recognize, celebrate our wives for all that they do for you and your family. To genuinely listen, building her up, complimenting her in front of others, and encouraging her when she's discouraged. Pointing out what she has done right and choosing to overlook the failures, to give grace instead of judgment. To be able to affirm and to celebrate them. More than anything else. You walking around flexing for her isn't doing anything. Because you haven't told her how beautiful she is or complimented her in front of her parents. The affirmation is more important. And what you're going to notice in all these, none of it is physical physique. Because as you get married and time goes by, what used to be a six-pack has now become a keg. Okay? There are physical attributes that change when a woman has children. Their body changes. And so there's different things that change with that. So it's beyond physical. And so just if you're only wrapped up in the physical, you're going to have a hard time. We'll talk about this on this, sorry. The second greatest need that was, according to these studies, is connection, emotional connection. This is what prepares her to have physical sex, to be checked in on, to be told that she's loved when her husband stops what they are doing to affirm or attend her needs, to talk through things, to go, hey, I know you're going through a really difficult time. Sorry you had a hard time at work. Let's stop there. Let's just talk. Or, hey, after dinner, we get the kids to bed. Let's just you and I talk. it's fuel to their tank. And if you want any kind of anything afterwards, it is so important for us guys that we need to contend for the emotional connection with our spouses. We have to. You can't just sit there and do nothing. I don't know what in our culture, and I struggle with this too, what told us guys that we can just sit by and let our wives do everything. We have to be actively encouraging them. Number 3 is they desire non-sexual touch. Okay, guys, I have to define what that is. A back scratch, a held hand, a hug that doesn't turn into foreplay. That does not turn into, hey, I'm going to put my hand on your knee and hope for the best. No, just put your hand on her knee and leave it there. Encourage her, talk to her, and then walk away. To be able to show affection without that you're not going to get something out of it. That's selfless love. Just non-sexual touch goes a long way. This is my favorite one, 4th connection. This is why you came to church this morning. The 4th thing that women said that they desired is a spiritual connection with their husband. For them to be able to connect with them and say, can I pray for you? The way that you lead your family, in the ways of, I don't know how to pay for this bill, but can we just go on our knees before Jesus and pray? Can we? Hey guys, it's 8:30. We got to get going. We got church. Hey, do you want to serve? During one of the services together. Guys, listen. Church is sexy. Jesus is sexy. Doing your daily devotions is a good thing. When you begin to open your Bible and share with your wife, this is what God is speaking to my heart. She's undressing. And the reason because that when you begin to engage not only the spiritual, not only the physical and the emotional, when you begin to the spiritual side, you are in alignment with God's design for sex. He created it. So when we said at the beginning of this message, I said, hey, we're talking about sex, and someone said, yeah, that was worship. It is. It's worship to be able to engage in a healthy sex life with your spouse. Which makes my job so important. My job, guys, is to make you sexier in front of your wives. So to open up that Bible, write those notes, pray together, share with each other, have communion together, share about the deep things God is doing in your life. And you're going to experience a healthier sex life because you invested into your spiritual connection. 5th one is romance. We were really good at this, guys, when we're dating. Oh, man, I heard an amen. That was like a amen. Anything that a man can do for his wife that lets her know that she is special, that she is heard, that he is thinking of her. That could be a gift, that could be notes, that could be flowers, that could be a affectionate, not sexual text. Something that is that or candles, or something that she just enjoys, that you just do, again, just so that you can let her know that how special she is. That you went above and beyond to make sure she felt like she was the only one. So, I know that was a lot for all of you. Hopefully you all took notes, you highlighted, you underlined, you put little markers. You're ready to go. Now we're going to talk about all the single ladies and all the single men. In verse 6, in that same verse, Paul continues writing, I say this as a concession, but not a command. But I wish everyone were single, just as I am. Yet each person has a special gift from God, one of one kind or another. So I say to those who aren't married and to widows, it's better to stay unmarried, just as I am. But if they can't control themselves, they should go ahead and marry. It's better for them to marry than to burn with lust. So first of all, if you were single in this room, Paul's saying, you're better. But how many of you say you don't burn with lust? That's a whole other conversation. So marriage is something that you do desire. So when I say single, I'm talking about the people who have never been married. You've never been married, but I'm also talking to those who have walked through divorce for whatever reason, or who have been widowed. You are now considered a single person. And if you haven't picked up the Mingling of Souls, you need to pick up that book. It's absolutely incredible. Because sex is for the growing intimacy of a husband and a wife. Now, if you are not married, that partner is not your husband or your wife. Whether you are on this side of marriage or you're on the other side of marriage, that either divorced or widowed, whatever the reason, is sex is designed for the covenant of marriage. Because it's in that covenant of marriage that there's safety. There's under that covenant of marriage that there is that design that God has created that you have submitted yourself to. And so your biggest thing is, as much as point one for all the married people is have as much sex as you can with each other. See, this is why we come to church. Number two, for single people, the biggest thing right now is you need to practice your self-control. Because if you're not self-controlled when you're single, you're not going to be self-controlled when you're married. Because just because you get married doesn't mean that the girl that you see walking down the street is no longer attractive. But if you never practice how to say no, you're not going to know how to say no when it matters. And that's why it's so important that you take advantage of the time that you are single. Attraction and temptation does not stop at the I do. If you don't have self-control as a single person, you won't have self-control as a married person. Whatever your emotional dysfunction is right now, so if you're single in this room, or even if you're married right now, think of your emotional dysfunction that you have just within you. What marriage does, it puts an exclamation point on it. It doesn't cure it. It doesn't heal it. Now, you put two people in the same room who both have emotional issues, dysfunction, and then you have the exclamation points. You put them in the same room together, guess what? You have a lot of issues. So being a single person, you have an opportunity to work on you without the complication of a second person. And some of you are married, you know what that feeling goes, I wish I could just deal with this on my own, but now I'm having to carry their load as well. But that's where God goes, well, that's the beauty. That's where I come in, and we'll get to that. So real quick for all of our single people, knowing that attraction is good. You should be attracted to the person that you're dating or that you want to marry. That's like the initial thing, especially for guys, physical attraction. That's what you're going to notice, and there's nothing wrong with that. Women, there's going to be an emotional connection or a character connection that you instantly like, wow, I like this guy. It's okay. It's good. Beauty is something that God created. But it's important that our attraction and our relationship has to go beyond the physical. Because as I mentioned before, physicals change. Okay? I used to be skinny and like not where I'm at right now. And that's my own fault because I like certain things to eat. And I'm working on it. But there's again, I talked about with pregnancy that changes the body. With age changes the body. Some of you guys had hair when you got married. And Roger, it's not her fault that it's gone. So once those long locks that you loved in the 70s are no longer there, because there's something greater that you're going after, it's okay. And this is why character is essential. The real you does not exist on Instagram. It does not exist on the perfectly filtered and perfectly pictures that you take. It's not, when you get married, you get all dolled up. You're ladies, for the most part, you're ready on time. And like guys, you cleaned your car. And now you're, guys who are married, like you don't clean your car. You just threw on the shirt you wore 3 days ago. Is all that stuff goes away, but it's the inside of you. And some things to look for as a single person when you're looking for someone who is, that you're wanting to marry, is are they submitted to authority? How's their relationship with their managers and their bosses at work? How are they believers? How's their submission to their pastor? How are they submission to their accountability partners and their small group leaders? And how are they submitted to their parents? How do they treat their parents? Because whatever way that they treat them is the way they're going to treat you. Don't get impressed by the good looks and the suave. That goes away when pressure hits. The other thing to look for is, do they have commitment issues? Do they just jump from job to job to job, relationship to relationship to relationship, church to church to church? Do they just keep doing things because once it gets uncomfortable, they leave? Because once they get uncomfortable with you, their temptation or their natural response is to leave. How are they in that commitment? How do they suffer? Because if you think life is just full of rainbows and butterflies, it's not. Suffering happens. Accidents happen. Parents die. Jobs are lost. Are you able to see a person before you put a ring on the thing to be able to see that they know how to suffer well? Sorry, I didn't mean to make a joke in the middle of that very serious sentence. Are you able to see how they suffer? One of the things that I liked Aaron a lot when we were dating. For me, it wasn't love at first sight per se because I had a lot of issues. But for me, when my grandpa passed away and I saw the way that she cared for my suffering, and when I saw her walk through some things that caused her to suffer, that's when it clicked for me and go, I want to marry that woman. Because when people are able to suffer well, they're going to suffer well with you. This is when you begin to see it, when people don't suffer well, this is when abuse begins to happen. This is when infidelity begins to happen. This is when, you name it, begins to happen, because when the pressure hits, the cracks begin to show. So as a single person, you have an opportunity to look for those who know how to suffer well. How do they behave? How do they react to unfavorable circumstances? And then, are they repentant? Do they say they're sorry? Do they say, hey, that was my bad fault. It's my fault. Or do they blame it all on you? Well, you should have done this. You should have done that. Or are they willing to take responsibility? Now, if you're married and you're going, I'm not any of those things, we have learning to do, right? There is no perfect person in this room. There's no perfect marriage in this room. There's no perfect single person in this room. There is going to be dysfunction no matter what. And then there's relationship. Single people, if we can begin to understand that we're meant into relationships to build trust and to test commitment, not to play house. You need to be able to be away from each other and together and to be able to test that commitment with each other. It's not going to work if you've already begun to move in, you already began a sexual relationship. That's not marriage. You're experiencing what happens when two bodies get together. And this idea you have to try on the jeans before you buy them. Dude, the best part of buying jeans is the relationship that you build, and they become your jeans. Because you got to break them in the right spots, and you know them. You know what I mean? That's why that's why you can wear them every day or every Sunday. If you think you're going to have the perfect sex life the moment you have a one night stand, and go, that wasn't anything. That wasn't very good. I'm going to go on. You're never going to be satisfied. Because if you're looking for a satisfying sex life and just looking at the physical, you are going to be left wanting every single time. Statistics show over and over and over again, people in a monogamous relationship in marriage have the healthiest sex lives of all humanity. Because it's more than just physical. So, number one, write this down. And you already wrote down, hopefully. Embrace healthy sexual intimacy. So if you're married, take each other's needs seriously. Talk through them with your spouse. There are seasons such as pregnancy, menstruation. Even as you get older, you can always continue to build intimacy. You are more than physical beings. Nurture the emotional and spiritual needs of each other. If you're single, be aware of your needs and build your character. This is the greatest opportunity you have to build your character, because your marriage is a constant test of your character. So take advantage of that time. It's easier to change one person compared to trying to change two. And Paul says it's better to be single to focus on the Lord. Number two, Jesus should be at the center of your intimacy. Now, I understand that this may sound awkward when I say, hey, Jesus should be the center of your sex life. You're like, I didn't have that conversation. Every single person in this room has dysfunctions in your life, and it's only Jesus who can bring healing. It's only Jesus, when you and your spouse begin pointing each other to Jesus, to recognize, I can't fulfill your every need. Guys, you can't fulfill every need of your wife. Wives, your husband can't fulfill all your needs, vice versa. Jesus is the only one that can bring complete healing to our emotional, physical, and spiritual lives. I cannot imagine myself being married right now if it was not for Jesus. If it was not for my intimate relationship with Jesus, I would not be married right now. Marriage is way too hard. I'm way too selfish. It caused so much more work than I ever could have dreamed or imagined. It is Jesus and Jesus alone that has made me a better man. And it's been the prayers and the patience of my wife. But if Jesus wasn't at the center of it, we would not be together. As a single person in this room, you need to spend every waking moment pursuing a deep, intimate relationship with Jesus. Because when you start concerned about the things that Jesus is concerned about, you start finding people who are concerned about the same things. So that Saturday night hookup doesn't look any good because they don't love Jesus. When Jesus becomes your best friend and becomes every aspect of your life, you begin to live in a different way. As a married person, when you pray together, you contend for each other. Imagine instead of arguing for each other, you start praying over each other. Instead of being against each other, you start being for each other. It is really difficult to be upset and angry at a person and hold that contentious spirit toward them when you are praying for them constantly. Now, there are times when the prayer is, Lord God, help me, I don't know what to do. And it is, Lord God, please change them. Every time Jesus says, I'm too busy changing you right now. Because as God works on your heart, trust that God is working on them, and believe me, he does. I have story after story, even to the part that saved my marriage, when I said, God, you need to help my wife. And it was from that prayer that healing began to happen. Prayer is the greatest thing that you can introduce into your marriage. Everything we should lead to Jesus. This is why I know this. Sex in marriage is good, right? I know some of us are still out on that. Sex should be good, and it takes work to get there. Marriage should be good, and it takes work to get there. But did you know when we die or when Jesus comes back, we are not given away in marriage in heaven? You're not married in heaven. There's no sex in heaven. And some of you right now going, oh man. Now, some of us, we do that humorously. I get it. But if in your heart you just heard that and went, maybe I don't want to go to heaven. What we've done is we've identified your God. And that's pleasure. And that's dominance. Until you allow Jesus to take over that he is a name above every name in your life, you will constantly struggle to try to find that fulfillment in your life. So I want to conclude with this story out of Scripture. And I'm going to invite the worship team forward. They're going to introduce a new song as we go into this, and I want you to it's a really easy song, so I want you to just sing it out. I want you to look at lyrics, and it has to be a prayer, because this is what I know. Are we okay? We breathing? Okay. You just get a little hot in here? We're good? Okay. It's freezing. I was trying to help. We are all in need of redemption. Every single person in this room is in need of a touch from Jesus. Some in here are struggling in your marriage, or you're struggling in your singleness. You have allowed the enemy, your sinfulness, to influence your sexual life decisions. You are living with hurts. You're living with open wounds. You are living with a regrets. You're living with drama. And I believe that Jesus wants to set you free. Maybe you're stuck in sexual addiction or pornography or masturbation or an extramarital affair physically or emotionally. Maybe there's married couples in here, and I was praying for you all this last night, just finishing preparing, that there's marriage couples in here, that you are withholding sex from each other, from your spouse, or maybe you are ashamed for years of a sexual discovery that you begin feeling ashamed about sex because of the way you discovered it, the way you learned about it, and there's shame in your bedroom. Maybe you're a single person here who lived your sex life outside of its design, and now you have a history. Perhaps you use hooking up to numb the pain, and now it's time to get healed. Maybe you're on the side of divorce or been widowed, and you hunger for that sexual relationship. The loneliness is so strong that you just don't care anymore. You've allowed yourself to fall into a sexual relationship. This is the great news, is that there is no condemnation in Jesus Christ. In John 8, we see this verse that says, as Jesus was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught into the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. So imagine your worst sin discovered. Your entire sexual history put out there for everyone. Completely exposed, thrown before the public. It says, teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. What? The law of Moses says that we should stone her. As people around this woman begin picking up large rocks, not little tiny, large rocks that will bash in your head. People say when she's completely nude at this point, completely open, completely vulnerable, completely everyone can see. She was caught in the very act of it. They were trying to trap him and saying that they could use this against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust of his finger. Well, they kept demanding an answer. He stood up again and said, all right. But let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. He stooped down again and wrote in the dust. And as I was talking about this message with our ministry team this week, Dom and Abby brought up a message that they heard, is that one of the reasons why Jesus would stoop down and begin writing in the sand. That way people's eyes were no longer on the woman shaming her, but they were now focused on Jesus so she could have relief. Jesus takes the attention off the sinner and puts it on him. He says, you without sin, throw the first stone. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? She said, no, Lord. And Jesus said, neither do I. And I want everyone to stand together. And I want us to understand this passage as we look at this. You may have a history. You may be walking through stuff in your marriage where it's dysfunctional. And by the way, if that is you, you're not alone. My encouragement for you, the first thing you got to do is you need to press into an intimacy with Jesus, to get into his word, to begin praying and say, God, what do you think? Begin having that relationship, even if you guys haven't touched each other in months, to be able to get on your knees before the Lord, holding hands and saying, Lord, would you help us? And then you may have to go and ask for help. You may have isolated yourself so much to the point that you don't want anyone else to know. The only way you're going to receive healing is if you get rid and break the chains of shame and guilt. The only way you're going to get out of your addiction, guys or girls, is if you get rid of and you come out and you confess it, not because someone wants to stone you, but because Jesus is there to set you free, to get rid of the shame and the guilt. So as we worship together, I want us to take the time to press into who Jesus is. Maybe you need to come to the front. Maybe you just need to stay at your seat and make an altar there before the Lord. But seek out Jesus, as he alone will bring your healing.